I've seen that same nun run up a 20-foot wall like a squirrel.
There's the demon again. The eyes are green, the slanted pupils, and the demon looks at me and goes,
got a text in Greek from a possessed person. So the demon took over. I know it sounds goofy, but demons aren't stupid. They know how to use phones. They know how to text people.
Welcome back. In this video, we're going to be tackling the issue of why they don't just record the exorcisms. It all stems from an order from the Catholic Church to forbid anyone involved from recording these things. I think by the end of this video, you'll see why I think that that's such a dumb decision, or it's just proof that they're either lying frauds or they're actively being manipulated by the very demons that they warn us of. The Church is playing right into Satan's hands by neutralizing their greatest power and creating this insanity-inducing situation where people that experience it believe it, but everyone else on the outside mocks it, and thus dismisses all Christianity, or at least Catholicism. Let's jump into it. I'll be pulling from 3 interviews because Cameron has done a great job of pushing on this point. Let's start with the most recent one.
My ways according to your will. And with that, he just levitated right up off the couch.
And the host, Cameron Bertuzzi, does get him to elaborate to make sure everybody understands what he is saying.
Imagine you had a rope tied to your belly button and was pulling you up off the ground, and your limbs are just flung backwards. It was like he was being pulled up through his core, and everything else was just flailing backwards.
Was he? But he was on the couch.
Well, he started on the couch.
He started on the couch, and then he kind of like got pulled forward.
No, up. He was up in the air with his limbs hanging.
Okay, so he was sitting down, and then he just started to levitate. How high up off of the couch did
A couple of feet?
Levitate? Okay.
And we get into one of 3 times that he does push them on the very question I'm asking here: why don't they just record it?
So what is your response to that? How do you explain why none of this is caught on camera, that we can all sort of see it and verify it?
First of all, I would say there is. I've seen stuff on the internet that shows people who are manifesting demons. It's out there.
Father Reehil says that he's seen stuff about this online. So you're okay with others taking the lead on using the best modern day scientific tools to understand this, letting them share what's going on. But then he does the tired old point of their dignity comes before your curiosity.
We personally don't record anything because that person's dignity comes ahead of your curiosity, quite frankly.
And he goes on to say that imagine how ridiculed that person would be at their local church. They'd be known as that possessed woman, which is just rich coming from a faith that is built on the foundation of martyrs, from Jesus himself to the apostles that knew him, out to the countless martyrs that were willing to give up their lives to spread the gospel. It's even in scripture. In John we get, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," Jesus said, "but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him." This would be true for the possession victim. So why doesn't the priest here just go a step further and say you shouldn't talk about your experiences with the paranormal at all? Who wants to be that weird kid at school or the Jesus freak at work, talking about your personal interactions with Jesus? Many believers are converted by paranormal events that they attribute to Jesus or God the Father or Mary or some saint. Maybe some loved one visited them. So why not encourage them to be cowardly and keep those stories to themselves too? Imagine how great it would be if you had video evidence. You claim that the Holy Spirit came to you and changed your life. And look, we have the video here of the glowing, ethereal, dove-shaped light being coming to talk to you at the same moment you're claiming this happened. We can't know what was going on in your head, but obviously that gives the skeptic a bridge to the faith. It closes that evidentiary gap, where the totality of evidence would tip in favor for the believer. Occam's razor would make the scientific-minded, evidence-demanding skeptic look like the crazy conspiracy theorist if there was an abundance of video proof of these things, and these things seem to flee from things related to Christ, be it relics, rituals, or scriptural readings. And the church believes in a worldview with demons. So with all that video evidence, ta-da, the Christian actually has the most logical worldview, because the skeptic's view can't even account for what we are seeing. This is literally the line of logic I went down myself when I started giving Christianity more credit, believing in a spirit realm and wanting to hear Christians' take on this. And it's why so many people have an interest in the subject of demon possession. It's a great intersection of the quickest way to prove that it's really happening, and immediately refutes people that don't believe in any aspect of the paranormal. There are Catholics like Jimmy Akin who study all sorts of angles on the paranormal, and he knows that you could still make a claim that someone could do everything we see the demons doing, but by using other means like ESP or telekinesis. They could be reading minds or moving things with the mind. So while showing videos of these claims doesn't prove the Catholic worldview, it's obviously a step in the direction, against the secular materialist worldview that everything you experienced was generated from your physical brain.
Distort the face, blur it out, change the voice. Couldn't you still do some of that stuff to make it anonymous?
Yeah, but you're also affecting the exorcism. because your intention should be solely to get rid of the demon, not to be creating some kind of movie.
It jumps right into this false dichotomy that if you're filming this, it has to be done with bad intentions, that you just want it to be like a movie, something for entertainment. He then says that we should just go to some place like Lourdes, somewhere that miracles are happening all the time. But you see this sneaky con artist-like switch here?
And for people that think that they deserve to be able to see this, go, there are places, my first time I saw somebody that I knew was possessed was in Lourdes. It was a young woman waiting to go into the baths. And when she got close enough, the demon was like, I'm not having this. And she went ballistic. And I was about 20 yards back in line. And I remember when she locked eyes with me, I could see that was not her. I was looking into the eyes of something that was horribly evil.
So if I am doubting stories about people levitating or running up the wall like a squirrel, I should just go to a holy site where I can see those obviously demonic preternatural feats? No, of course not. I just might see some spooky look in a woman's eye. And then on top of that, he even adds that maybe he just saw it because he knows what to look for.
Maybe it's because I know what I'm looking at, but I see this more than just people coming into my office.
So come on, what's the point here? The average person is still left with no reason to believe that this exists. And I want to jump back into earlier in the conversation where Cameron mentions that he gets the questions from his audience all the time. Why does he cover this topic of demon possession so much? And he says that he actually doesn't.
Over 600 videos and maybe less than 1% are devoted to this topic. So you may just see it pop up a lot, and that's why you might think that we cover it a lot.
And I believe him, but the thing is that these videos get tons of views. Check out any Christian YouTube channel and you're likely to see demons in the top 10 of their videos. Culturally, Pasulka talks about this in American Cosmic, that there is a need for Catholic advisors on horror movies because when the plot involves demon possession, they go for a Catholic priest, not some Protestant or anything else. Speaking generally here, of course, but think about the fact that the most amount of movies or TV episodes that include Catholic ideas are going to be coming from horror movies. Way more about that than stuff on other doctrines or rituals or the lives of saints or even Jesus. Lampert, Reehil, and Blai, of course, all have books. They go out to do these interviews. I'm not knocking it, I just hate the hypocrisy that their interest in understanding this comes from a good place, while your interest is just vain voyeurism that must come from cynicism and a lack of faith in God. Let's turn to some comments from Father Lampert. I'd say he's the most famous exorcist today, tons of interviews with him, gives his own talks too, and I know it might be weird to say, I'm being very critical here, but I don't think he's lying either. But without the evidence, I also don't want to say he's telling the truth, it's just a weird spot.
Such as causing a body to levitate or to crawl up the wall like a spider, for example.
And Cameron leaves this question for last.
Why don't we have really any video recordings of these sorts of manifestations happening?
I think the number one reason is it's always to protect the identity of the individual. Because if someone's possessed, they may not want to put themselves out there for public display. You think within the Catholic world, like confession, there's kind of the seal of confession is kept confidential.
He makes that same old point that it's to protect their confidentiality. It's like a confession. But there is no creative thinking or bravery here on their part. They don't even leave open the option for a person to consent to it being filmed. Why are the people writing all these books and going out talking about it, not thinking outside the box for how we can spread this true information? The same old lame point that, well, some people won't believe the evidence anyway.
But we also live in a world where people say video can be manipulated and whatnot. So even if we had these things, would people still accept it? Or would they begin to suggest that somehow things have been modified?
Any example you want to pick, from flat earth to some politician saying something, isn't it great we have video evidence to point to? We don't just have to rely on some authority figure or trust them. And to that point, it's because it's still hard to go up to space yourself that some people believe in flat earth. Clips from outer space or the space station do come to us from an authority figure that wants us to believe in it, so some people aren't convinced. But it diminishes in direct relation to the amount of tech we use to display the thing in question. There are supposedly thousands of cases of possession every year, and all these guys are claiming that possession rates go up year after year. So yes, some people might doubt the fact that the Vatican released the video proof. You really might even find priests faking it, but most people would believe in the phenomena overall, even if there were some frauds, because of the sheer volume of video evidence. And footage that would be taken from other people involved, like friends and family, that are allowed to be there too sometimes. There's even strangers allowed in the church during exorcisms, but still nobody can film anything. If they did, we'd have all sorts of footage, and you would force the skeptic to have to believe a larger conspiracy to deny demon possession. All these thousands and tens of thousands of people are all working together to fake stuff. It just wouldn't make sense. The simple deduction would be that all these people are filming a real phenomena. And of course, still, you would not have global 100% belief in this, but that's not true for anything, and we could make the belief in the spirit realm as common as round earth believers, and doubting it as fringe as flat earth. Whereas the situation we're in now is the exact opposite. Priests all over the planet are complaining that people are leaving the church. Science and the public show no interest in studying the paranormal because these claims have not been picked up by our most common devices. They fail to meet the standard of evidence we would want for any other claim. But Cameron does push further.
That we can do with a video to alter them to protect the identity of the individual. So it doesn't seem to me to be too big of an issue. So for example, we could blur out their face. We could change their voice, make it deeper, change it in certain ways to change the inflection. There's AI programs that can do that very easily.
But it doesn't get far because all these people in the field just fall back on obedience to the church.
The ministry of exorcism, the importance of obedience. You know, if a priest is being disobedient and doing things that the church does not permit, being disobedient and trying to fight the devil is probably not a good combination.
And again, why is the host making the best points here? It's like the scales are on the eyes of these exorcists and authors that just shrug it off and go, that's how it is. Cameron at least is trying to make a comparison to the Shroud of Turin.
How they're like, no, you're not going to come in and tear things off again and destroy parts of the shroud just to, have scientific results that are going to be overturned in a few years. Like, we're not really going to allow you guys to do that. That's kind of what happened when they analyzed the Shroud of Turin back in the 70s or the 80s. And so I can see why they might be skeptical that this would be a good practice to start allowing.
But this is a one-of-one relic from 2,000 years ago. I'm asking people to open up to the option to share their evidence with the demonic, not just in conversation form, but in video form while it's happening, not for vain reasons, but for the exact same reasons these guys are talking about this at all. To expose the danger and lies of the demons and show the power of the faith. Lamper goes on to say that another fear is that people will just focus on the allure of the dark side.
If they were recorded, would people put the focus where it doesn't need to be? Would people be more focused on the demonic rather than on God? And then if people are watching these videos and it's a true exorcism and demon possession, people could get caught up in that hysteria. You could see a lot of people believing that somehow they're possessed or maybe they did something similar. And then, again, it could create a widespread hysteria. And again, the focus should always be on our own relationship with Christ.
Again, this would be a ridiculous minority. And you could say the exact same thing for the Bible itself. Someone could think, wow, demons and Satan are really powerful in that book. Let me try and contact them. And they would have never thought about doing that before learning of their existence in the Bible in the first place. So filming and sharing the video proof of this is no different. An interesting point Christians bring up all the time is how hard it was to create a book or scroll back then. It was the equivalent of a year's salary in some cases, if not more. So they say that the culture knew that you weren't writing random fanfic silly stuff down by hand at your expense and then preserving it with your life if you knew it was just a lie. So the intersection of culture and knowing how this tech of books worked became one of the best ways to spread the faith. And looking to these books is one of the best ways to have an accurate view of what happened. Now we have different tech. We can record with video, not just words. Now last might be the most frustrating interview. I won't be too repetitive here with my critiques. I think you get the point. But Adam Blai, though not a priest or father, he's an expert of religious demonology and exorcism for the Diocese of Pittsburgh. He trains exorcists nationally and regularly participates in deliverance ministry. Basically, he's gotten a thumbs up from the church to act in their interest without having an official position like priest or monk. So he's not some heretic, some new ager, or random ghost hunter or something. He studies and spreads Catholic views on the phenomena. I should have mentioned this earlier, but you have to give credit where it's due. The Catholic Church does think scientifically and embraces modern medicine and psychiatry. Again, my frustration is that they do this literally everywhere, but actually recording the most important and contested part of all this. But everything I've heard agrees you don't just call up the church and they send an exorcist. They make sure the victim in question had a physical exam and psychiatric evaluation, which is lengthy and can be expensive, but they make sure everything is done from the standard medical side before they start the exorcism. And all of them do admit that there are plenty of cases of people trying to fraud them, either to mock the church or for attention. There's all sorts of reasons. But back to Blai, he expands on the victim knowing all sorts of languages that she couldn't have known. And the logic here is that angels know all the languages, and so would fallen angels. But it goes somewhere you might not expect.
I know this will sound strange to you, but I got a text in Greek from a possessed person. So the demon took over. I know it sounds goofy, but demons aren't stupid. They know how to use phones. They know how to text people.
It could very easily not sound goofy if you release the text. We then get someone using the Force.
I've seen a person gesture towards a screw that was in the wall across the room, kind of like something out of Star Wars. And it rips out of the wall, flies across the room into their hand, and they ram it into their arm and start gouging themselves.
He also thinks he ran into Satan himself, saying that he could just tell after 15 years of doing this that everything got much darker and the pronouns changed from our kingdom to my kingdom.
When I was confident for myself, and everybody else that was there I believe was too, that it was actually Satan, like the pronoun changed. It wasn't our kingdom anymore. It was my kingdom that he was talking about.
And Cameron pushes my favorite point, that there is a connection between miracles and demonic attacks.
Relationship between miracles and demon possession, in the sense of both of these provide evidence for the truth of Christianity.
And Blai walks into the point that I keep trying to point out, and everything from religions to UFO phenomena, that all cultures claim that the spirit realm is real and that there are good and bad actors in this phenomena.
Islamic exorcists that use two different methods to do exorcisms. There's Jewish exorcists in certain branches of Judaism. There are Buddhist exorcists. There's Native American exorcists. There are exorcists in India. This is a universal human problem.
He adds that to tie it all together, the demons are able to do their own versions of things considered miracles in other contexts.
About levitation and exorcism, we also see levitation with some saints. And it happens usually during Mass or during prayer, they'll float up. Well, when we see levitation and exorcism, it's the devil doing a mockery of something that God does. Holy angels also know all languages. They're using a faculty that they had with this infused knowledge that they had, and they're just applying it in a bad way.
So saints and possessed people can float. Angels and demons give you the ability to speak in any language. They can move objects, give you superhuman strength like we see with Samson. What about this part?
The devil can't heal. He cannot heal because he cannot create. What he can do is either mask the pain or take away a injury or a malady that he is making in the person. So imagine somebody pinching your arm and then letting go and saying, I healed you.
But isn't that exactly what happens all throughout the Bible? Specifically, we already mentioned John 9. The good God, the Creator, made our bodies with this function of sight, but this man was blind since birth. He was deprived of this normal function. It was removed. If God was in charge of everything, and all the bad stuff came from our original sin and our continued sin, then the only thing that should need to be healed are things caused by human misuse of their free will. We would deserve the punishment, and God would come in through grace to heal us from something that we brought about. But this verse is clear that this was not anyone's fault. Not even generational curses could be blamed for the case of the blind man, and it wasn't his fault. But to use Blai's analogy, it was like God was pinching him, and Jesus was the one to let go, or stop inflicting this perversion of God's plan, that original design of creation from the true God that intended him to have the faculty of sight. Really think about the implications there. But moving on to this point against the skeptic.
If you want to look at some reasons why you might want to consider that it could be real, first off, I would look at the span of human history, that this has been a universal human complaint and problem in all the world religions down through history.
But the problem is, they are all the Spider-Man meme. Catholics probably get criticized the most because a lot of Protestants think that demons have influenced a lot of church teaching. Seeing all sorts of demon-planted idolatry from Mary worship to the rosary and certain prayers and the doctrines. Christians think Muhammad was tricked by a demon masquerading as an angel of light, just like the New Testament warned, and they ignore Christ's warnings of a false prophet coming after him, while Muslims think it's a sin to equate Jesus with the Father and have things like Mary statues. So it doesn't really help his point that they all believe that there's a demonic realm, but at least he admits that if someone feels that they have never experienced the paranormal, and the church won't let us record exorcisms, then he understands why you wouldn't believe this is even real. And he just wants to make sure you don't dabble in the dark arts either.
It's fine if you think it doesn't exist, because that's a rational position. If you've never experienced anything spiritual, it's reasonable to say I don't think it exists because I've not bumped into it. Then I would just say, at least please avoid the dark side of the spiritual world. Please avoid the witchcraft. Please avoid divination, playing around with demonic magic, goetic magic, that kind of stuff.
Then he does this "you can't handle the truth" kind of move that gets Cameron to react how we all would when he says he can't even include some of the darkest parts of the exorcisms.
I held back all the really horrible stuff. Like, honestly, no publisher is going to publish it if it had the full grossness of what goes on. And so there's very little
Well, now
out
I
there.
want to know what you're talking about.
Actually, you don't.
I actually agree in general with the point that you don't want to include some of these dark details if you don't need to. It's just bad to have rolling around in your head. But we're trying to prove something here. And if you go down that line of logic, Cameron also pointed this out one time, I think with Father Lampert. Like, if they don't want us to look into this further, then let's just not write books about it or talk about it at all. It could just be an internal matter handled by the church. But remember, the Catholic Church wants everyone in the world to take on their worldview, to agree with their claims. Whereas these apologists slip out of this by framing it like it's some jury or scientific review board, because the experts that are weighing in on this actually see the raw data. He makes the comparison to trying to study this scientifically as being like saying we don't believe sexual assault happens unless we can film it in the act. I get the point that we can expose people to attacks in lab conditions, but those kinds of attacks are not worldview shifting events that nobody really believes can even happen. And still, we look at physical signs of the attack like DNA left over from the attacker, and if there was something like a security camera that caught the act, of course that would be admitted in court. Not doing so might get the case thrown out. And the comparison breaks down further because they set up the exorcism with all sorts of other tools and personnel. They pick out a time and place. And so to use this comparison, I would say, yeah, it's unethical to make somebody possessed in a lab, forcing subjects through some sort of praise of the Dark Lord or Ouija boards, whatever you needed. That might be unethical, but the exorcist is showing up after it already happened. He didn't do anything to bring about the possession, and so it's more like having a body cam on first responders. And that helps lay people understand some of the things they come across, people dealing with mental illness or under drug influence. So it makes it a lot easier to believe these claims. And again, those are claims that don't even go against our worldview. So in summary, you use tech everywhere else. I'm watching this interview online via YouTube, the whole series of tubes that is the internet. You used a video camera to record this. You used enormous mechanisms of printing press and distribution systems to get this book out there. All throughout history, the gospel was spread through any means people could use. The church should at the very least allow people who are suffering from demon possession to consent to having this filmed. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Hit that like button, it really helps out for the algorithm. Comment suggestions for future videos, stuff like that. Check out other videos. I'll see you in the next one.